Hi, welcome. This is the CaddyInfo.com Cadillac Chat. We do these on Thursday nights. I have with me Air Mike from CaddyInfo and XLR.XLR-net.
Hola.
Welcome, welcome, welcome. GM had record earnings in the first quarter. They managed an earnings before taxes of $2.7 billion. Earnings before IT. So so good for them. They continue to, now their sales are not the most ever. Their sales were actually pretty neutral, but what they're getting better at is making money on each sale. And certainly they had room for that. Yeah, that's how you make money in the car business, is you make money on every car you sell, and then you're happy, and then happiness breaks out. So their net revenues were about 37 billion versus 35 billion for last year, so very similar there. But their earnings per share was $1.24 a share versus 56 cents last year. So hopefully they'll continue the good dividends. They did announce, their dividend coming up already, and so hopefully they'll keep going that way. What I ended up doing with my car portfolio is I had bought a little bit of Tesla and then some GM and some Ford, but the Tesla market kept doing this, which made me nervous, and so I ended up getting out of Tesla and just doubling down on the GM and the Ford. So I have just the American automobile manufacturers, except not Tesla. Now, the next time Tesla swings through, I probably should pick up another dollop of it. What bothered me is I couldn't tell why was the stock going up and down. In other words, I got the impression that somebody knows more about this than I do, because they get good news and the stock could go down, they get bad news and the stock could go up. And so that had me worried.
I don't know anything about them.
Yeah, now GM will do that sometimes, where I think their stock's a little seasonal, where during some parts of the year it goes up and some parts of the year it goes down, in addition to the normal up and down. So, but I think if you have companies that you like, you should invest in them. And so GM, if you're listening out there as an owner, I want to see more Cadillacs.
The more you buy, the more you help.
Exactly. And all of you watching, if you want GM stock to go up, go buy a Cadillac. That's clearly the key, is when people buy Cadillacs, the stock goes up. So no, it's good that they're doing well. I'll have to go through and read their balance sheet to try and understand how much cash they have sitting around. They're a little bit negative on cash flow, but that may be normal for them this time of year, and based on they have a lot of investments going on with they have the new Cadillac SUVs coming out and so on, and so that's one of the things that was popular to say about car companies for a while now, is that an automobile company is a way to destroy capital, because it requires so much capital to come up, as you tool up for new cars, you just literally, the model has to be, you're going to sell 100,000 of them in order to make the capital make sense, right?
Right.
And so now we have seen more boutique manufacturers. Tesla's not making a dime still. They're losing money on every car. But we have seen more boutique manufacturers, like Ferrari says they make money on cars. And certainly they don't make very many of them. But it's good that they've got that model worked out. Of course, if you can sell a car for $300,000 that it cost you, $50,000 or something to make, then you can make more money.
Do you suppose it costs them more or less to build a car than the American manufacturers?
Quite a bit more. Ferrari, I think, has a lot of, it's very labor intensive. And so I suspect that their labor content is much higher. Now, I also suspect that their markup per car is much higher.
That's what I was wondering, is how much of it's markup per car and how much of it's just
Yeah.
cost per car.
But, you know, GM traditionally would have kind of a break-even number. And the really hard thing is when you're planning the new Malibu, right? If you're planning out a new Malibu and you need to sell 200,000 examples, so if you sell 185,000, cattle are dying in the street, and if you sell 215,000, then you start to make money at it.
Right.
And so, but a Malibu depends on what other cars come out in that same time, and you know what's popular and who has the crazy colors, and so you may make a perfectly competent car that doesn't sell 200,000 examples, and if you sell 150,000, then somehow you're unsuccessful. Versus, you know, Ferrari comes along and sells 2,000 for the year, and they're thrilled. Same thing with our V cars. If Cadillac sells 2,000 V cars this year, they'll be happy. You know, that's not their volume seller. Even though they had 10 of them over at Crest, I think, when I was shopping. But if they sell 2,000 a year of the V series, that's good news. The AT probably 2,000 of each V is what they're shooting for. Go ahead.
How many do you suppose they have to sell just to make money? Like you were talking about 200,000 example of the Malibu.
Well, it depends on how you do it. The best example I could think of was the Porsche 914. I don't know if you remember the Porsche 914. So Porsche was going to make a certain number of them and call them Porsches, and Volkswagen was going to make a certain number more of them and call them Volkswagens. And so the Porsches were going to have the flat six out of the 911, and the Volkswagens were going to have the four-cylinder Type 4 engine out of the Volkswagen bus, or their little station wagon. But when they came to the United States, instead of and in Europe it was called a Volkswagen Porsche, and Volkswagen and Porsche weren't the same company then; they were two different companies run by related families. But now they are the same company. But when they came to the United States, they called it just a Porsche 914. So in Europe, it was sold as a Volkswagen Porsche. In the United States, just a Porsche 914 or a 914-6 if it had the six-cylinder. But when Volkswagen did the assembly, but when they doled out when they split up the cost, instead of splitting up the cost, amortizing the cost over all of the bodies, they amortized Porsche's share of the cost just over Porsche's bodies, if you see what I mean. So when they had custom tooling for putting the six-cylinder into the Porsches, they ended up driving the 914 cost much higher than it should have been. And so the 914s, even though they were supposed to be the entry-level Porsche and you know, it's a low-cost Volkswagen, that they ended up being almost as expensive as the 911s of the time. Huh. And so all this magic about how you split up cost makes a huge difference in where you can market the car, right? Now, how much would you suspect that it costs them to come up with an ATS-V instead of the ATS? So yeah, you got to put a different engine in it, and you got to engineer the engine, and you have to, you know, you're going to have different assembly instructions. But if you think about the main differences, the seats are different, the instrumentation is different, the chassis is the same, so you don't have that big chassis cost, but it's programmed differently. Body's the same, so you don't have that big body cost, but you have quite a few differences because the hood is carbon fiber, and you know it's a custom hood with the insert, the lower front panel, the bumper and everything's all custom done. The air splitters are all custom done. So how many millions of dollars do you think? Now keep in mind for scaling, and I don't know the answer, but keep in mind for scaling that just doing a redo of the ATS year to year, usually they spend $30 to $50 million.
Just for the new
just when they come out with the two, the 2015 versus 2014, where the car didn't change that much, then they'll
Right.
spend 30 or $50 million.
Really? I had no
So
idea it cost that much.
yeah, well, it's you're refreshing all your vendors. What if this supplier doesn't make that part anymore? And you may have 800 suppliers on the car, right? By the time,
All right.
well, what they'll do is they'll buy to make the Cadillac assembly simpler. Like the entire dash will come from a dash manufacturer, but then the dash manufacturer will have 30 different suppliers that feed that dash. Does that make sense? So the dash manufacturer will send the dash as kind of a kit that's put together at Lentz and Grand River, and so they'll buy the vent and the little dial that goes in the vent and so on from somebody and have all that put together already.
Right.
So they'll get kind of sub-assemblies at the main factory. So yeah, we'd have to think about what would the actual cost, the separate capital. So if just a year-to-year change is 50 million, then the V version might be 100 million, right?
That sounds incredible, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's a lot of money at my house. But at GM, so then would you amortize that cost just over all the ATSs you sell? You can't amortize it over the V series, right? In other words, you
Right.
wouldn't want to spread $100 million over 2,000 cars.
Right, because it's not it's not a whole new car.
Yeah, because it's going to add too much money per car. Now, to be fair, they do make quite a bit more money for the V. The V series is what it's a significant. It's almost $15,000 more than a full up premium ATS. So an ATS V, by the time you get all the premium features, is close to 75 versus an ATS premium is 55. So it's almost a $20,000 increase. So if you had $100,000 that you were trying to amortize over, let's say 2,500 cars, then that gives you $100 million divided by 2,500 cars. So now I've got to amortize $40,000. That adds $40,000 in cost to every ATS-V. But you can't sell it for $40,000 extra, right? And the stuff in the car costs more money. The twin turbo V6 cost a little bit more than a twin turbo 4. Not that much though, but you've got the brake package costs more, the special tires cost more, the luxury features cost a little bit more. But let's say we're also selling 7,000 ATSs a month. So we're going to sell 84,000 ATSs total. So what if you amortize the whole 100 million over the 84,000 cars? So now we're adding, I did the math wrong. Now we're taking 100 million divided by 84,000. So we're still adding $1,200 per car, but that's a heck of a lot better, right?
Yes, but that's not
Suddenly,
going to work either. I mean, it costs a lot more than that to upgrade to a V car.
well, that works better because it costs $15,000 to upgrade, and it only costs us $1,200 extra. But now we got to add $1,200 to every ATS. So, if it made sense to sell the opening ATS at 35, suddenly you're losing money at it. So yeah, hopefully, so let's say they spent $50 million on the ATS-V capitalization, and they're only going to sell 2,500 of them this year. Then that adds $20,000 per car. So yeah, it's a tough business. Now, what if you could amortize that first, if you said, well, I'll pay that off over the 4 years of production. So then it's $5,000 a car and you're making money, right? But
And
so
there'll be small changes every year too.
yeah, but you'll have to amortize each of those. But
Right.
that's kind of what they do is they don't fundamentally change the car very often. Like they made the same XLR basically from 6 and 7 were the same. Now
Well, the car body, the car
4, 5, 6, and 7 were the same. They
and
had
they
slight changes. The radio changed, but the interior didn't change. The body didn't change. The exterior basically didn't change from 4 to 7, right?
to 8. Only year it really changed was
Yeah,
11.
8 the interior changed.
Oh, it did?
Well, it did in the STSV. I was thinking it did it did in the XLR because it got the heads-up display in 8. No, it
No, it
always had
had
the heads-up
oh,
display.
6.
Yeah,
No,
so
I don't know about the 4 and 5s, but the 6s had them.
yeah, so it basically stayed the same until they changed the body a little in 9 and then went out of business and
Yeah.
then stopped production. So yeah, I guess you could amortize over that whole 5 or 6 years, which would get you down to if you had 50 million, it gets you down to $4,000 each. And if you're spending 100 million, then it gets you at $8,000 each, but you're making more than that for the V, more than the premium. I don't know how much their materials go up. So probably they're doing okay. They don't
Do
have
you
to
suppose
sell many more V's than that.
they look at it like we have to continue this car for 3 years or
Yeah.
something like that to actually start making the money?
Well, what would drive you nuts is on the ATS, they said we're expecting to sell 5,000 of these a month. Now, we've had this talk before, though, about I don't know if that 5,000 was US and international sales or only US sales because they're selling 7,000 a month now. So maybe their Chinese sales save them. So,
So
of
we
the,
can,
worldwide, they're selling 7,000 ATSs a month.
so as Americans, we can badmouth the Chinese, but maybe that's the reason we have some stuff still going.
That's why we have the nice stuff.
Yeah, because they're buying enough of them.
Yeah, and they're Cadillac lovers too, right? So we're all the same that way. I'm not, I like everybody that likes cars. I can talk to anybody that enjoys cars. I don't particularly care. It doesn't matter that if they're not a Cadillac guy, but for goodness sake, if they're a Cadillac guy, it doesn't matter to me which country they live in.
Right. Well, I was referring to the fact that the lower price, their products and the manufacturing.
Yeah,
But
people fuss
the
about
fact that
not built in the U.S., but I appreciate the Chinese are the same way. They want the cars they buy to be built in China, right?
sure.
So that's what's driven the production is the Chinese laws actually tax you heavily if you don't make the car in China. So I think that's good politics. I'd like to see the United States do that. I'd like to see us say, hey, if you're gonna not have 75% content in the United States, we're gonna slap on a 20% tax. We don't sell any
Well,
cars in Europe anyway, so how does that hurt us? Because the Europeans would say, all the other products you're shipping over here, you're McDonald's, we're slapping a 20% tax on that, buddy. International trade law is tricky because you can't isolate it to just one topic. But and to be fair, a lot of car manufacturers have brought their factories over to the United States, right? The BMW makes the Z3, the Z4 convertibles in South Carolina, outside close to Georgetown. I
I
don't
did
remember
not.
which city, but it's along the way there. Yeah, and then they export them overseas if they need them. They make their crossovers there too. The little X3, X4, X5 that's made right there in the factory in South Carolina.
Huh. I wonder how.
So
Well, how come we're sending so much stuff overseas to get put together if they're building something in America? What's up?
yeah,
Help explain
what's
that to me.
up with that? Now they don't use union labor. You think that's tied into? You think there's correlation there?
Well, I always figured I don't keep up with stuff like that very well, but I didn't figure it was a matter of union labor. Even non-union labor in America is higher than.
Well, but that does make about a $10 per hour difference,
Right, but I meant
which is
uh,
significant.
correct. But you're still, even at non-union labor in America is still way
Oh
higher than
yeah, but
labor costs.
they appreciate that people people want their cars made here, and you have a shipping, and you have when you're doing high tech products, having a workforce with a better education and technical skills is an advantage, right?
It would seem so.
Like I was in a discussion about building a factory, and that was one of the key things we had to talk about was where are the engineers coming from, and what's our pool of talent in different states to try and understand where would you want to locate.
Yes.
We weren't going to be making cars, but at the same time, you can't just go plop down in the middle of the jungle and say I'm going to make cars here if you don't have an educated workforce that's going to come make the cars.
Right.
And so you kind of get what you pay for in that regard. Is if you're going to pop a factory in somewhere where you just have robots, then I guess that works better. But that never has worked very well. That was the story of Hamtramck, right? Is it was going to be a completely automated factory run by robots, and their quality control never got to where they needed it to be.
The robots could never make a decision. They just had to go with what they had, right?
Well, I think all of that's improving, and certainly the flexible assembly is the way to go. But I do think that for whatever reason, they never could get there. So it could have been supplier problems. It could have been, any number of issues. So I don't have the insider story about why that didn't work, but I'm certainly glad that Lansing Grand River, and soon we'll have Cadillacs coming from Kansas. We need some kind of phrasing for the Kansas Cadillacs. The new SUVs are going to come out of Kansas. So
maybe we can haul them on my railroad.
Yeah, there you go. You can bring them out of Kansas on the railroad. Now, one of the issues you have with car transport on the railroad is they get rail dust in the paint. Do you know that story? Tell me about that. Tell me about that, Mr. Railroad.
I can't tell you about it, but
tonight's railroading expert.
They have a lot of plastic, and they have them covered up nowadays because there's a mess out there. Nothing clean about a railroad anywhere.
So no, well, that's not the right thing to say. But tell me, what is it that I'm thinking about that it's railroad grit, or it's dust or something that comes off as they're traveling. They have to cover the cars because as they travel by rail, then they can get some kind of something in the paint, is my understanding.
I'm sure it's like the same thing as the brakes on your car, or the brake dust. It can penetrate. So there is brakes on them, on every one of them train cars, and they have to use them, and they're not hidden from anything. They just blow up in the atmosphere. So 5 rail cars ahead of wherever your automobiles may be, it's getting in the air. And then of course, if it's wet out, it's just going to stick to them. And they have another thing that they have, which is not really floating around in the air, I guess, but they have oil. They oil the rails to slow down the wear, and so that's got to be mixed in with it.
Yeah, this article is saying it's hot steel debris from the rail tracks and train wheels lands on the paint of a new car being transported to a dealership. The hot dust literally melts into the clear coat and paint on the vehicle. Can sometimes be removed by careful wet sanding and polishing. If it's penetrated the clear coat, the only solution is repainting the car. Rail dust happens only during new car transport. That's interesting. So the train just constantly has kind of a unperceptible cloud traveling along with it.
Well, you know how your car runs down the road and you have debris flying up, and it's no matter how clear the road is, there's some flying around. And on the train, it's metal to metal everywhere, and it's wear. Every curve, there's steel wheels rubbing on steel rails, and them little metal shavings are smaller than shavings, I guess, but it's all flying around in the air everywhere. And then there's also the fact that the soot out of the engines is in the air.
Oh, but they're clean now compared with the old coal engines, right?
Oh, no doubt. Compared to 10 or 15 years ago, they're immensely cleaner than they were then.
Yeah, now the trains literally run on diesel or on regular diesel, or they use a specific fuel for train engine locomotives now.
I really don't know what kind of diesel they use.
Well, you're my expert.
Well, I don't have anything to do with fuel in them engines.
All right. I was counting on you knowing all things about trains. They played with electric locomotives for a long time, right? And I guess
they are electric. They're electric motors that drive the train. The diesels run generators, basically what they do. And then the engines are pushed by electric motors.
Oh, so the locomotives are like the Chevy Volt.
Yeah, there you go.
They're hybrids.
Yeah. They've been that way since
Forever.
they come out with diesel engines. They're actually electric motors that turn the wheels.
Because they need the torque?
I suppose. I really don't know I don't know any theory about no trains. Man, I just go up
and
there.
How many years have you worked with the railroad?
40.
40 years on the railroad. You don't know what kind of fuel they use. You don't know. You don't understand how the locomotives are run. I don't understand what you're doing over there for 40 years.
Trying to make them go from one track to another. And that's what I do.
Yeah, trying to get them on the right, to get them on track. I'm trying to get them on track and keep them on the track.
My job for most of my 40 years has been, you sort them out like a deck of cards, where you put the clubs over here and the spades over here and the hearts. That's what I do at the railroad. Sort them cars out. And I don't know anything about what the track people do, maintenance on the track. I don't know anything about what they do in the shops where the engines are and all that.
Super specialized to car sorting.
Yep.
Okay. I have buried the headline. I am so sorry. Air Mike test drove an ATSV this week.
Yes, he did. It was an awesome deal.
So start from the beginning for those who haven't read your post on the forum.
Oh, geez. How far back did I start? I just took my wife up.
Your wife needed to do something, and so you were loose for a moment.
Yes, I had 2 hours to kill. And so I decided to kill him looking for an ATSV. And I'm not in the market to buy one today. I just wanted to check them out. And so I went to, I don't even remember the name, Hendricks Cadillac in Kansas City. And they had one for driving, and they had 2 more that were not yet prepped. A black one and I don't remember, maybe a white one. But I got to drive the gray one. I guess it would have been the same color as your car, wouldn't it?
Yes.
I got to drive that car, and I really, really liked it. And then
this one was a stick?
Yes, standard transmission.
6-speed? So so now when you drive it, you did basically kind of a dealership test drive, a couple of blocks around the dealership kind of gig.
Right. Me and salesman went for a little ride, and I wasn't into abusing this car at all. I just wanted to ride in it and see what it drove like. And when we got, and the guy who I was with was new to selling Cadillacs, didn't know a whole lot. He couldn't answer a lot of questions. So
Yes.
when I got back to the dealership from me driving it, I asked about what is that PD, the performance data recorder, yeah, PDR.
Yes.
And he didn't know anything about it, so he went and caught this Ryan. I don't have his card here. I don't remember his last name. But he got Ryan, and Ryan had been to the track learning how to drive him. And so he took us for another ride with him driving. It was a much better ride that way.
With the first salesman in as well?
Yes, we all three went. He wanted to learn a little bit more about the car.
Good. Yeah, the salesmen don't all get to drive the Vs unless they're out with the customer. They don't let the salesman just run around with the cars. So I think they have a big time if they get to get in the car.
He had a 75-year-old woman that had come in there last week to drive that car. I went on.
How'd
Tuesday,
she like it?
Monday. Evidently, she liked it, but I don't remember what the deal was. She didn't buy it yet. She might have been coming back to get it or get one.
Yeah, I hope that's what I'm doing too, is shopping for a new V when I'm 75.
A different kind of V.
That sounds perfect. Yeah, whatever the new V is that year, the sporty one, that's the one I want. I want to be looking at that at 75.
You know, they had a CTS-V in the showroom, but and I sat in it, didn't pay much attention to it. I was just feeling the seat, what it felt like compared to the 11 model that I had test drove one time, and it seemed pretty similar, but I just really didn't pay a lot of attention to it. I just looking for an ATS.
Now, was the ATS the ATS-V that you test drove had the Recaro seats or had the sport seats?
It had the Recaro seats in it. It was actually optioned pretty well.
Now, did you find them comfortable?
Yes, very comfortable. That was one of my complaints.
Vinny complained that the side bolstering was tighter than he enjoyed.
That's what was he talking about, an ATS or a CTS?
An ATS, I think.
Really? That was my complaint with the CTS. But the ATS has, yours don't have the Recaros, is that correct?
No, mine has just the sport seats.
Like 16 adjustments or something. The bolsters, you can make them narrow or wider on the top, the upper, the backs, or the seats, both.
Yeah, and this is what I said when the magazines complained about the Recaros. Is I said, well, they're completely just adjusted the way you like it.
Right. They were great to me. That was the complaint I had previous when I drove the earlier model CTS-V, is I didn't really care for the seats so much, but I really, really liked these seats. They were very comfortable.
Now, you felt like the acceleration was similar to your XLR-V?
Actually, I would say it has better acceleration than my XLR-V. I don't doubt for a minute that it's quicker than my car.
The XLR-V was about a 4.5-second car, and the ATS-V is about a 3.8-second car. So, side by side, it would just depend on who was driving what, right?
Yes, they make a lot of difference. It's very good taking off the line. It's real good, and it has cold air in the tune. But I still, even putting that, having a standard transmission and putting it in a higher gear, it pulled pretty good from just almost lugged down. Not necessarily lugged down, but it wasn't high in the RPMs, and it pulled real good.
Yeah, the engine profile on those two engines is very, very similar. But yeah, the ATS-V at the quarter mile, basically it's the same kind of story where the ATS-V might be 12.1 and the XLR-V might be 12.8. are similar. And so, but both of them are, faster than you need to go most days to the grocery store.
I don't know about all that.
Yeah, a car can never be fast enough, unless poor O'Connell got penalized 10 seconds because when the traction control came on, the boost went too high. And
Yeah,
so somehow they decided that was worth 10 seconds and took away his first place finish. So, and they did the race highlights they posted this week. I think I put the video up. Actually, you get basically the whole race in 5 minutes. The Cliff Notes version of the race.
Right. I looked at that a little bit earlier today.
Yeah. I thought they did a nice job of condensing it down to just you get to see Cooper go off and they explain why and the whole thing. And bless his heart, he had a great race and just hit the wall, which is going to happen with debris on the track. And on the racetrack, what happens is as the tires burn off, you can actually start to get little rubber balls, little rubber ball bearings
Marbles
on the track. Yeah, little rubber marbles on the track, and so it can become slicker. But the cars get stickier as they run, but then you're wearing the tires down, so it's a trade. They're set up to run sprint races, and so if you have to start from the back, it's a challenge. It's a Pirelli World Challenge.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, Cadillac's going to be racing again this week, so we got to get it all queued up so we'll know when to watch and so on. Last weekend there was a lot of complaining because usually they run live video when the race is going on, and then it's on TV later. But because it was going to be on TV 1 hour after the race finished, they didn't run live video so that you tune into the TV.
Oh yeah.
And so there was a lot of complaining by people internationally who weren't going to be able to tune into the TV and couldn't see the race live either.
Like blocking out them sports programs local if they don't.
Exactly. Except in this case, they blocked it out for everybody. Until it came on video, then nobody could see it.
Right.
Well, I was late getting in, which is why we didn't have the pre-show. We're a little late getting on, but I think we're going to wrap up early tonight. But I wanted to hear your story about the ATS-V test drive. So you wouldn't replace your XLR-V with an ATS-V, but is the ATS-V on your shopping list now?
Yes, it definitely is. I love that car. I'll be looking for one sometime next year, maybe. I won't buy a new one. I'll have to wait for you.
And I understand that. This was kind of my conclusion, though, is when I test drove the CTS-V Sport back to back with the ATS-V, it was clear to me that I was going to want an ATS-V. And so if I bought a CTS-V Sport because I could get one used and hold it for a couple of years and then sell it to get an ATS-V, the math didn't work as well as I had been thinking. If I knew I needed to get an ATS-V, then I was able to talk myself into just getting it out of the box instead of, waiting 3 years, waiting 2 years or 3 years.
Right.
But
and one difference is you traded in, you gave two nice cars. And so that run the price a lot lower for you to buy it. And I'm just not going to.
That's right. So yeah, you'd have to trade one or two of your extra cars in.
We can't collect cars if you're trading them off.
You can't collect them. That's a great line. Yeah, you can't collect cars if you're trading them off. But I wanted to get down to where I could use my garage technology. And I will note we have had 2 car destroying ice hailstorms since then.
2. I knew you had one.
And so if my car was in the driveway, it would have been totaled by now.
Right. So it's
then
good.
I might have gotten more money. I might have gotten more money from insurance than trading it in, but no, I was happy with the deal over at Crest, and glad that we were able to do that. I would hopefully you can get your salesman there in Kansas to participate on the forum. That would be fun.
Yes. When remind me, I'll have to get that card for you to invite him, I think, on here.
All right. Well, so thanks for being on tonight, Mike. Vinny, shout out to Vinny from Cadillac Country Club. Did log in before we went live to let me know that he was doing last minute planning tonight, and then he's got to be on the road tomorrow, I guess, back to New York from Phoenix. I think he was in Phoenix the last time we talked to him, so he must be heading back to New York. And Vinny,
Right.
if you come through Dallas, holler at me and I'll buy dinner. But so shout out to Vinny, to Jim and Jim, who we haven't seen on lately. But Texas Jim, of course, is taking care of family, and so we understand. And Cadillac Jim, we has things going on, couldn't be on with us tonight. Tim Carroll, I keep inviting in case he wants to come on and talk to us about his business and how it's changed this season. Of course, he's a master Cadillac craftsman, and so I always enjoy having him on. But every time when I do hear from him, it's like, well, I got the invitation, but I'm painting a car and I can't stop. I can't stop what I'm doing because, or, I've been talking to customers all day and my phone's got 5% left. Or I've, one week it was he used up his internet plan. And so I'll talk to you next month because I'm talking to overseas customers, and so I can't get on with you. But thank you for being on, Mike, and good to hear your ATSV experience.
And good to talk to you again, Bruce.
And if you're watching at home and you'd like to be on with us, and that way you can drive more of the conversation, I can be quiet and listen to you and hear Mike talk, then contact me and let me know that that's what you want to do, and I'll help you practice and get set up and so on. The other way you can do if you're already Hangouts fluent is in the forum each week. I post a link to the video, link to the meeting room, and so on, so that you can jump in and participate. And so, and if you want to hawk some item you have that Cadillac buyers would be interested in, we have some tolerance for that. It's a better way to put it. I was going to say a limited tolerance for that, but what I'm trying to emphasize is you're welcome to come on the show and talk to us about your product. We had, which I loved, we had the Cadillac Allard, Roger Allard from Cadillac Allard, come on and talk to us one night. He didn't have video, but he came on and did audio only. You can do audio only. You can do chat, text only chat if you're stuck, but certainly if you can do video, then that works great. So Mike, thanks for being on. Stand by a minute. Any last words of wisdom for our viewers?
Everybody should try an ATS.
Yeah, go buy a new ATSV. You'll love it.
One. Maybe you'll buy it.
Drive up those GM profits so that they come out with more V cars.
Of course.
All right, hold on just a second.